So my name is Lanny Peterson, and I invite you to join me in my story of Singing My Way Home, which is a story in 6 chapters, so we'll take it one at a time. Chapter 1, which is Just the Facts, Ma'am, which I'm not sure Just the Facts ever exists. Isn't it always a story? But I'll try to tell you just the facts. It was Christmas Eve, 1965, and I was 8 years old and excited out of my mind, which was not unusual for me. I got excited a lot, but Christmas Eve put me over the edge. We had a family ritual of going to the 5 o'clock service, the carols and lessons. It was the most, to me, beautiful night of the year. All of my favorite people gathered in both the pew beside me and filled the church, everyone dressed in their favorite clothes. For me, it was a green velvet dress with a big red bow, and my black patent leather shoes and little white ankle socks that had red roses on the ankles. My curly short hair was in a pixie bob, and I had no front teeth at all. There had been a little accident on the bike, which had prematurely relieved me of all of them, and it had been a time of no corn on the cob for quite a while. I was seated between my mother and father, as usual, trying to contain me between them, and my 3 older siblings were as far down the row as they could be to not associate themselves with either my parents or myself. I was used to that. This was my place, and everyone worked hard to keep me in it. The evening at church unfolded just the way I had hoped. It started with the story of Christmas and how it came to be, and each chapter highlighted by a favorite carol. And with each carol, I found myself being more excited and singing with more joy and excitement until we got to "Hark, O angels we have heard on high." Now, some of you who are of the Christian faith may know that this is one of those carols that just builds to this glorious crescendo of glorias that goes something like this. Gloria! And at that point, my father's hand came down and went right over my mouth. I sat down. I knew once again I had been too loud, too big, too much for everyone else in the room. And this moment became a defining story for me. I became very attuned to when this energy would start to build, and in me the spirit start to just emanate in the room, and I learned myself to just take it down, take it in, make it smaller. This story became a thin, deep line in my life. Chapter 2, the perpetrator's perspective. Christmas Eve, church. They all got dinner. I came right from work, moving too fast, too late, just trying to get here in time. There's a lot to do to close the factory down for 2 days, which means 2 days that I pay people and they don't work. These kids, they don't know how good they got it. They've never seen a war. They don't know depression. They don't know what it means to get up at 6 in the morning to go to work, not knowing who's going to show up, who's going to be on the machines, what I'm going to have to step into, what I'm going to have to do, who I might have to fire, which means they can't feed their families. They're just here celebrating Christmas. They don't know what went in to buy that bike in the cellar. They don't know how hard I have worked to make sure we have this home and this food, and the pressure that all lands back on me. My oldest son, he's applying to colleges. He's applying to places like Harvard and Yale. Can you believe it? I'm proud as can be, but who's supposed to pay for that? And then there's 3 more behind him. Well, those 3, they've sort of got their life together. But then there's this little one here. This little one, sort of a late arrival in the family. I'm going to be working till I'm 60, 65. Don't see retirement in sight. Sometimes all I want is just a little bit of a space, a little bit of room, a little bit of just quiet. Chapter 3. The board of directors to the rescue. It's Christmas Eve, 1965. Green velvet dress, red bow, ankle socks, flat pants, shoes, no teeth, curly hair, excitement of Christmas, and the song begins, "Glow!" And the hand begins to come down, but it's intercepted by this man I don't know and have never seen before, but I see him introducing himself to my dad. Pete, Robert Bly, Wrought Iron John. You read it? Don't think so, Pete. Pete, my man, we need to talk. Let's step outside. Got a little fire going out there. We'll sit beside it. We'll talk man to man. I think you've lost track of some things, Pete. I think it might be helpful to settle back into what it means to be a provider, a husband, a father, a man. And I saw my dad stand up and walk out of the church with this man's arm around him, and I looked stunned at my mother, but there was someone talking to her. Gloria Steinem? Gloria, saying to my mom, "Emmy, I noticed you weren't singing. Where is your voice? You are the role model for this young girl. How are you standing up and letting your joy emanate in this room? Emmy, we need to talk." And I looked beside me to notice that there was a gentle arm around me. A man in a sweater who I realized I knew well. "Mr. Rogers?" And he said so sweetly into my ear, "Now that could have been a very difficult moment, couldn't it? But all's going to be all right because, you know, you are special. You have a joy inside of you that this world needs to hear. So don't let it stay inside. Let it out." And I looked up and noticed in the pulpit was a different Mr. Rogers, actually Dr. Rogers, Carl Rogers, the father of humanistic psychology. And the sermon was all about unconditional love in family, about forgiveness. And I thought, is it for my dad or my mom or me? Who is his message for? And then on the other side, I noticed an energy coming around me, an energy that was filling me. And there was Maya Angelou. And she said, the message is for all of us. The message is about finding who you are, what your voice is, letting your own unique voice fill the world, and don't let anyone ever tamp that down. And there I sat with my own personal board of directors, reinflating that thin story back up into one that would help me move forward into the world. Chapter 4, a fairy tale. Once long ago and far away in a kingdom off in a land you will never go to, there was a beautiful little princess. And every day she would go out into the garden to play alone, because she was often alone. Her father was the king. He sat on the throne and made important decisions all day long. The queen could often be found by his side, making sure that his every need was met, that he was comfortable. Every now and then she lifted an eye to see where the children might be, but she knew that they would take care of themselves, that they were cared for. The older princes, they had gone off to do what young knights in training do, learning to fight dragons, chasing beautiful maidens, learning the wisdom from the local wizard. The other princess, the older princess, for some reason she had long ago locked herself up in the turret. Loud music often emanated out the windows, and in the image of the open turret window, the younger princess could often just see her brushing her hair, looking sullen and grumpy, because that's all she seemed to do and be. She had long ago left the silly games in the garden. But for the little princess, it didn't matter. She seemed to be happy enough just being out in a beautiful day, exploring to see what she might find, to see what might fill her once again with wonder. And one day, walking and exploring through the bushes and the trees and the maze of paths that she knew so well, she saw a glint there under the bushes. And exploring more closely, she pulled out from under that bush a beautiful brass horn. She had seen something like it in the distance when musicians had passed through towns, or sometimes the courtier had blown this to pull people together, to awaken the message in the kingdom. But here was one that seemed to have perhaps even been left for her. It glinted in the sunshine, in its round ropes of brass coil that emanated in a horn at the end. And she wondered what sound it might make if she brought her breath to it. She lifted it to her mouth and inhaled. It would take more work. It would take more time. It would take more air. And in time, this beautiful sound began to emanate, and it seemed like the ripples went off and touched the hills and came back and bathed her in the vibrations. She fell in love with this horn. She continued to blow this music until one day, when with particular joy she blew with all of her might and energy, she felt the ground rumble. It was a rumble she was familiar with. The ground actually shook, and a black cloud filled the sky, and then the heat of the flame of the awakened dragon seemed to burn her eyelashes, heat the horn so hot that her hands couldn't hold it anymore, and she discarded it back under the bushes and ran. It felt like she was fleeing for her very survival, fleeing back into the safe walls of the castle where she could make herself very small, so invisible that she would not get the attention of the dragon again, that she might continue to survive. And there she stayed for a long time. She became hypervigilant, always looking for where that dragon might be and what might awaken its wrath. And as she grew older and wiser, she began to notice that, in fact, there was no pattern to the dragon. That sometimes it would emerge for no reason and throw its flames to the air, and other times when she was sure whatever was going on would awaken it, it was nowhere in sight. And that's what gave her the courage to step out and begin to look for the horn. It was still there. Dare she touch it? Dare she lift it to her mouth? She took one small breath and blew. A squeak emerged, and nothing happened. Larger sounds, and the dragon appeared, and she stood and held that horn and waited. And yes, her hand burned, and her eyelashes frizzled, but she was alive. And so she blew louder and stronger. And some days she was unscathed, and other days She was burned, but what she realized was the joy of blowing that horn was worth whatever else might come. And she tucked that horn under her arm and carried it everywhere she went. Dragons be damned. Chapter 5. 50 years later. It's Christmas Eve. I'm standing in church singing between my mother and my father. My father's been dead 27 years. My mother's been gone 19. And yet they're still around me and always will be. My oldest brother's now a grandfather of 3. My next brother died at 18 in a car accident. He's forever frozen in his adolescent beauty and rascalness, still there beaming in his 18-year-old self. My sister, now a mother of 2 grown married children, also there, and surrounding me also, amidst these ghosts and real people, are 4 children of my own. 3 daughters and a son, and a husband who helped me bring them into our family in all different ways. And we begin to sing. And I feel that joy emanating up from me, and the music coming out in the vibrations that I know will cover this church and come back to bathe me again. And I look at the corner of my eye and I see my father's hand rising. And I'm the one to take it now and to say, Dad, I understand, but I choose to sing. This is my song. I have daughters here who I want to have see me sing. I have a son here who I want him to find his own joy and song. And I know there are parts of this that will always be hard for you. But that is yours. And this is mine. And I will sing. Chapter 6. Epilogue. It is a Sunday morning in spring. The tulips are blooming in their full, and that sky is as bright blue as it ever gets. And my husband and I are late for church as usual. We bound up the steps, and I hear that the opening hymn is already started, and already I am happy, because in this Unitarian church, they are singing on this spring morning, Cat Stevens' Morning Has Broken, and it doesn't get better than that. We race to an empty seat, and my husband dutifully opens the hymnal, and I think, I know Cat Stevens. I don't need to look at the words. And I, without hesitation, burst into song. My husband, who's the first to realize, perhaps not even the first, but realizes that I'm not singing the same words as anyone else in the whole church, looks at me and with a question, and that's all I need. In the corner of my eye, a raising of a hand leads me to be 8 years old, and I sink down into the pew, realizing once again I have been too big, too much, too loud. How dare I sing that way? I am thin in my story. My first response is, why did I marry that man? My second is, how dare I be a teacher? How dare I be a therapist, thinking I can help other people when I behave this way? How dare I be a parent, raising children? How irresponsible can I have been in this moment? And I take a breath. And then I begin to call on my board that has grown beyond Maya Angelou and Carl Rogers and Gloria Steinem and Robert Bly and Carl Rogers, Mr. Rogers. It's grown to now be this board of advisor, my husband. He does know me. He does care about me. He does want me to sing. His issue may be about the right words, but he's not trying to stop me. And with each anchor that I pull into me, it reinflates my story such that by the time the next hymn is there, I have reinflated myself. In 10 minutes, I have recovered, whereas before it took 20 years. The recovery now is so much quicker. They say that in the place where one has been wounded, the scar is actually a stronger place. I know that's not true. I carry a thin story within me, which will always be a vulnerability. But I know now all the ways and people and places that I have, that when I am triggered into smallness, that I can find the stories that will reinflate me and allow me to step into my life and be ready to sing again. And I invite you to join me in a chorus. Gloria, la 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 la. I may not have the tune, I may not have the words, but it's my song and I'm gonna sing it. Come on. So I'm not sure of the time. Does anyone know how much longer we have?
Half an hour.
Oh my goodness. So, for those who would like to stay, we invite you to ask questions, to give any responses, thoughts, appreciations, concerns you have for either of us. We welcome whatever you might bring. Yes?
Lenny, I so appreciated that story, and it's so